Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Hello, there's my voice. Wonderful. Thank you for joining us, and congratulations for getting this far through South by and still going to talks. That's very admirable. We applaud your efforts. My name is Verity McIntosh. I'm a producer at a place called the Pervasive Media Studio in Bristol in the UK. We're really excited to be able to share some of our work, some of our thinking with you this afternoon. We're really aware, I just want to kind of say straight away that there's extraordinary wisdom and expertise amongst you guys. We know already that some of you are extraordinary experts in this field. So I would say, as we're talking to you today, do start thinking about what you'd like to talk to us about. We're as interested to hear from you as we are to share what our points of view this afternoon. So what we're talking to you about today is kind of taking a bit of a view on where we are. We all probably can agree that in recent years there's been an incredible kind of convergence and ubiquity in the way that we can experience our technologies. Our machines in our pockets have developed superpowers and alter egos beyond anyone's expectation a few years ago. We've been able to condense a number of experiences into apps, into smartphones, into very convenient, compact environments, which in many ways is a fantastic thing. But I guess we would probably also agree, and feel free to again argue with me at any time, that your relationship with this device is a small part of your life. It's a small part of your everyday experience, which in itself is personal to you, is varied, is serendipitous, is unusual, and is in many ways a tactile physical experience. And so how can we find some sort of parity between this kind of digital ubiquity and the variety of our everyday lives? One of the things that we see happening a lot at the moment is when we're designing new devices, new experiences, we're trying really hard to kind of match that variety and ubiquity by sort of stuffing features into every single device that we create, to trying to kind of predict every possible outcome, to design for every possible outcome. And in doing so, are creating things that are often very, very similar one to the next as they try and compete to be one thing to all people. So this is creating a certain kind of generic response to the design of creative approaches to technology. And I think today, one of the things that we probably have in common, and there are many things that we don't have in common, but one of the things that we perhaps do on this panel is that we're interested in the kind of the next state of design maturity. As we start to work more with digital and physical tools, it's time to look again at how we consider the design of the objects and the experiences that we're creating as the design community. It's time to sort of consider how we might build in more nuance, more personalization, and less everything all the time, everywhere. So, to introduce a little bit about where we come from, we are all based in the Pervasive Media Studio in Bristol. I run the studio, and these guys are part of the resident community. We have a community of about 110 residents within the studio who are all autonomous companies and individuals. They come broadly from creative, technology and research backgrounds and are each looking at a particular facet of how creativity and technology can work together in the future landscape. So what I'm going to do today is invite them each to very briefly introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their work and their approaches to designing for subtle interfaces and calm technology, which will mean different things to different people. We're going to have a bit of a chat about what we think that might mean or what we think the considerations might be. And then, as I mentioned, it would be really great to kind of spark up a bit of a lively conversation with you. I think we're reasonably relaxed humans, so if at any point you want to just sort of disagree with us or kick in a different point of view, there's a little microphone in the middle. Don't feel like you have to wait for questions. Just come and shout at us. It's always a pleasure. So, with that invitation to shout at people, I'm going to hand you over to our first speaker, Tom Metcalf.
Hello. So I'm Tom. I'm a designer. I run a small studio in Bristol that builds digital and physical products. And we also undertake research looking at experiences in the Internet of Things, specifically exploring calm technologies and the qualities and affordances of objects. So as Verity said, I'm going to very briefly go through a few of these projects that we've been working on and some of the projects I worked on before setting up the studio. And hopefully it's a small section of my work, so hopefully it's appropriate for this topic and will spark some conversations later on. So we'll start off with this. I think this is a slight provocation a little bit, but often this is a starting point in my work. The top is a no-brainer if any of you do UX. We really do want to create better experiences with digital products. The bottom one, though, our future relationship with objects, what is that, is a little bit more difficult. We don't know that, and when you bring them together, you get some interesting exploration. That often for us is inconspicuous tech, invisible tech, that isn't shouting for the user's attention. It's sort of, it isn't central to their attention either. It's usually off in peripheral vision and isn't right in the center of the action. So I'll start off with one of the products that I was going to talk about, which is RainCloud. So RainCloud is a small, beautiful object that only tells you whether it's going to rain today, whether it's the next 2 hours, the next 6 hours, or today. And the way it displays that is through the animation of the animated behavior of the droplets on the product. So the product is about this big. But what's key about it is the way that you can use it. It's not a notification that you get on your phone that comes with all your emails and everything else at the wrong time and the wrong place. This is something that is much more actionable. You can place it next to your coat, you can place it next to your umbrella or your boots, whatever you would like to take out on a rainy day. And it's not there always shouting for your attention. You see it when you need to see it. With that playing? No. With that, actually, taking that to a bit of an extreme, think about when you're on holiday, on vacation. This is a quick video sketch. This is a vacation OS. So when you're on holiday, maybe you don't want to be always plugged into work email or every other sort of mindlessly going through all your apps. Yes. I'm going to try and go back. Mindlessly going through all your apps and actually just trying to maybe switch off. Some people might actually call this some technology detoxing. So this has got limited functionality. So you might need some core applications when you go abroad. So you've got camera on the iPhone is great, so keep that. Why carry a separate camera? Wallet, messaging, weather, those sorts of things. So you would set your time of your holiday before you go on holiday, and you cannot get into the rest of your phone until you get back from holiday. Yeah, discuss that. I think it's probably quite a good idea for me, certainly. So I mentioned the physical world, and this is a 18-month, 2-year project looking at interactive newsprint. I actually presented this with a few colleagues a couple of years ago at South by in more detail, but we were looking at the future of print. So using conductive inks and printed electronics and connecting print to the internet, what would that look like for the publishing and print industry, but also from a media provider's point of view, what would it mean to have updatable content in print? The output of this is always audio, so there's no moving image, but there's a number of interesting things you can do here with analytics for publishers knowing how long people have listened to articles, and you can update printed content, which is always static otherwise. So we're looking at the affordances of paper and the value of paper, which, like many physical objects, is sort of taking a bit of a back seat to our digital world, and actually maybe there is a more nuanced future relationship between the two. And finally, I'm going to show a new project I'm working on. So this is an extremely lo-fi prototype, but it's called Snow Day. And what Snow Day is an object that tells you whether school is closed today. And in Britain, that would be a day that's snowing, hence the name Snow Day. So Snow Day is built in an extracurricular class at school by pupils. Everything is open source, it's non-instructable, so you can print it. All the hardware is open too. So they build their own Snow Day, so they know that if school is closed, they don't have to go in. So the interaction here is you pick it up, and then if the belly glows, that's the indication that school is closed. And they're my opening examples, and we'll talk more detail in a bit.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. So I'm over to our next speaker, Chloe Minuk.
Hello, So I run a small studio called Studio MyNeck, and what we do is we specialise in designing with people rather than for people, and we tend to create technology products for social good. So I first got into this field with Music Memory Box. I had a loved one with dementia. I was looking at things that I could buy my grandma that would help her, and I saw not that innovative products on the market, so I decided to create my own thing. So Music Memory Box is essentially a shoebox. You fill it with trinkets, familiar objects, could be a pebble from a beach. You put a sticker on the bottom of this object and you can trigger music or audio content when you put it in the center. So what Music Memory Box does is it links music, objects, photographs, to create a really multi-sensory reminiscence activity. Some of the benefits are that it's reconnecting families together, because often it's quite difficult to talk to a loved one with dementia. So if you've got a safe space, a small piece of music that triggers a memory, it's a fantastic way to reconnect families. So this is Adrian. He's had Alzheimer's disease for 5 years, and this is a particular song he plays. And he can recognise himself in the photographs through the piece of music. So some key considerations in the design process whilst designing with people with dementia. It has to be familiar. It can't be an alien object. It needs to kind of be simple to operate. It's a joint product, so it's not only for the person with dementia, it's for the family as well. So there's 2 different kind of users of the product. And the main thing is that you can't get it wrong. So often it's quite frustrating if you've got dementia. Lots of things don't seem to work. Lots of things are changing. So reducing the chance of failure through using objects to trigger music. And also it still has to function when it's not plugged in. So when it's not working, it's still a beautiful box with really important objects in. So this is May. She lives in Brighton in the UK, and she's just listening to her favourite bits of music. And I'm really interested in the power of objects and how these can support our identity through times of struggle. And really important tactility in objects. Picking up a pebble from a beach on a holiday is really, really important. And with this in mind, I've now used similar technology for a product called Trove, which is for children. And this is a collaboration with an academic who specialises in working with children in care and adopted children. And her research really focused on the importance of objects and the importance of children writing their own life story. So currently in the UK, a social worker will write a life story book about a child's life, and the child never really gets to contribute to that. So with that in mind, we started working with lots of kids, getting them to co-design in the product, going away, filling treasure chests, customising them, filling them with their own objects. And then we started adding tech. So you can put a sticker on an object and record an audio story. You can play this back and you can archive it and you can change it over time. And the look of it, so children really didn't want an old-looking treasure chest. They wanted a treasure chest from the future. So this is how we've kind of designed it. It looks kind of like a geometric rock, sums up the idea of preciousness. And we've just done a trial with adopted children. So when you use Trove, what actually are the benefits? So we found that it increases the likelihood of you talking about adoption with your parents. And also it puts emotional attachment to your objects. You start looking at them in a different way. And also the opening up of conversations. So again, it's kind of a joint product for the child and for the adopter or the foster parent. So that's that project. More later.
Thanks, Chloe. Lovely. Peter Bennett joins us as a studio resident and also part of the University of Bristol.
Great. Okay, so So, as Verity said, I'm an academic researcher, but also have the pleasure of working with these guys in the Pervasive Media Studio. So, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to try and do a really, really quick sort of project splurge of my background projects, of everything sort of related to why I'm doing slow tech, calm tech now. And then I'm going to show you a brand new type of interaction that I've been working on over the past year and a half called resonant bits, which is a whole new method of interaction. So, background projects. So way back, I studied cybernetics and I ended up creating a lot of things like virtual drums, and I got really interested in haptics and sounds. This is a virtual drum kit. From there, I kind of took this experience and went to study design, digital arts, and so forth, and kind of kept up the musical instrument sort of theme and haptics. So this is the Peak Cube, which sounds a bit like scratching 6 records at the same time. So not very calm, but it kind of has the seeds of that in it. From there, continue creating musical instruments, sticking with haptics. This is it's almost like a wireless record, so you can play this anywhere and frisbee it around to people. Really good fun. And then went through to design maybe slightly more serious instruments, such as the beat bearing, which is a good few years back now, but marries ball bearings with a drum machine. So you actually have a very playful way that's not software or screen-based. So it's getting away from the graphical user interface. And is genuinely really good fun to play. So from there, getting into slow tech, rattling along at high speed, but getting into slow tech, this is the chronotape. Now this is a tangible timeline for family history, where you can actually cut and splice a timeline of your family history going deep into the past. See, 200 years would be about 20 meters, I think, at this scale. And it's quite fun. And you use a microfilm reader style device to actually go through. And this is brilliant because it's really, really slow to use. It took half an hour to make your tape. It could take 5 minutes just to reel back to 1750 when you found an ancestor to put in. And this is really what started getting me to look at slow technology particularly, and calm technology. So just to give indication of what I'm up to at the moment, 2 brand new projects that I don't have anything to show from at the moment, a few months old, is one is using Lego. So it's PhysiCAD, which is using Lego as a computer-aided design tool, which is good fun, and a nice way of bringing play and calm to an engineering design environment. And also EchoSnap, which is a very slow composition tool. So the idea is that you collect sounds over the course of a year, maybe even longer, and they grow into a composition. So, with that as a very quick overview, I'll now introduce you to resonant bits, which is a particular sort of subtle technology. So this started with a collaboration with a magician, a research magician, who was resident at our studio for a couple of months. And he introduced me to a really interesting effect with a pendulum, which you may well be aware of, where if you hold a pendulum really still in your hand and just concentrate on the bob at the bottom, you can actually make it move with the power of your mind, which is really, really spooky, but actually explained in science through something called the idiomotor effect, where very small movement builds up and actually creates larger movement, which is then visible to you and observers. So instantly, being a tech sort of design developer, it's like, can you do this on a phone? So this is one of the first prototypes of how you can just use essentially wobbling to control 3 different things. So you're doing the same motion over and over again, but it's just a different frequency. And as far as we're aware, no one's really explored this too far. So we've spent the last year and a half looking at various things you can do. So a bit of John Coltrane at the end. Now that one's not very magic because you can see, this might be a bit loud, so, oh yes. This one is a version that uses micro movements. This is trying to use millimeter level movement to actually do the same thing. So your vibration at a particular frequency triggers content. And this is interesting because it starts to feel like magic. It starts to feel like it's just doing it itself. And we're hoping that you can actually take this further and do things such as control your device through another object. So through the table, you just place your hand there and control it from the other side of the table. And this is something that's it's almost working. Not quite. But there's a few other spin-offs very quickly going through. This is what I'm quite pleased with is something where it uses the natural wobbling of an object to trigger content on a phone. So this is simply a very small magnet in the end of each of these. So it's just a bit of plastic, laser cut plastic, and a magnet. and that will actually trigger wirelessly through the content. And this is quite a nice calming action sort of to play with. And the nice thing is you can translate that to natural objects. So as Chloe was saying about pebbles, it actually works with, you can put a magnet on a pebble and you've got an interface, sort of a natural interface to your device. So this is another example of using a geographical tile which has memories or sound recordings attached. So as you wobble the device, it wobbles the sound recording. And finally, probably last project, is we've then applied this to a rocking chair. So in the same context as Chloe, I've applied this to dementia care units in a residential care home for elderly residents to actually experience stories just through the rocking of the chair. And this is probably the subtlest interface I've done, because they're not always aware it's even working, but it creates a really interesting environment for storytelling. So I think I'd like to leave it on that slide and hand over to Verity.
Thank you, Pete. A frantic splurge of calm technology. Who knew? So I'd like to just quickly offer you a slightly different perspective. Unlike the rest of the panel, I'm not a designer, so apologies up front. My role is often as commissioner, as producer, as somebody who is kind of first instigating the creation of these works and then working with creative practitioners to see them through to their realization. So for me, the considerations when I'm looking at commissioning projects are kind of, is this appropriate? What's the potential here? And I think increasingly we've been finding the most extraordinary work is coming where people are able to kind of embrace subtle interfaces and calm technologies. One of the ways that we've been exploring this recently is through a program called Playable Cities that some of you may have come across. We regard a city as a malleable, open, configurable space that is sort of best served by its community and its city governance. And so we're interested in the way that we can combine creativity and technology in public space with citizens to kind of rethink cities and to remake cities in interesting ways. So one of the ways, I've got a clicker, this is ace. One of the ways that we've been doing this is working in different cities around the world. Colleagues of mine are currently in Lagos in Nigeria, which is the fastest growing city in the world, to work with a team called Future Lagos there to think about what are the needs, what are the interests, what are the enthusiasms and passions within Lagos right now that can lead to exciting kind of public interventions with artists there. We run an international award every year called the Playable City Awards. We host a conference and we run a number of different kind of provocations around the world. Some of you might be aware of it because this very last 12 months, I think it was last February to April, you yourselves hosted a Playable City project called Hello Lamppost by Pan Studio, and Sam's in the front row. Hello, Sam. So Hello Lamppost came to Austin and gave Austinites the opportunity to strike up playful conversations with the very fabric of their city. They were able, through a very lo-fi technology, the SMS text technology in your phone, to address any object in the street, to say hello to it, and to have it respond to them. And it would ask them questions about what their life was like and what they were experiencing, and it would then echo back to them what others had said to them. So you were really kind of gently having this subtle interaction through text message, a kind of a whimsical interaction with an inanimate object that would then become animated in your imagination and share with you stories of your own city. So the technology is very low barrier to entry, and the experience is one of sort of delight and inquiry and inquisitiveness. The project that I particularly wanted to share with you is the 2014 commission that we have been developing recently called Shadowing by Chonko and Rosier, which was the Playable City Award winner that happened 2014. And this is a project that I do think exemplifies subtle interaction and calm technology because it requires absolutely nothing of you. You don't even have to have a phone with you. You just have to be physically present. It's a project that lives completely hidden in plain sight most of the time. During the day, this just looks like a series of lampposts. We use the housing of existing lampposts, streetlights, but hidden within those streetlights is a series of clever technologies that interpret your movement underneath. So as you walk underneath the lamplight after dark, it will capture your shadow and it will play it back to the next person. So the shadow that comes with you as you walk under the light is not your own, it's the shadow of someone else who shares that space with you. As you can see a little bit, some people take that invitation as an invitation to be playful in public, which is something that rarely we feel permitted or able to do. Some people are very gregarious with it. They will dance, they will make shapes, they will hop and skip and start to kind of seed a shadow that they then want to return to and play with their own image. But others are much more sort of discreet about that, and many people will just sort of catch it at the corner of their eye. They will perhaps do something, perhaps they won't. Perhaps they will just spend the rest of their commute that day thinking about that kind of extraordinary experience that they have. Perhaps thinking about how they feel about having their image captured in public and having that relayed, and how that equates to CCTV culture that we rarely see the output of unless there's a problem. So how do we kind of reappropriate those surveillance technologies to create moments of magic and exquisite experience in public space? For me, one of the lovely things about commissioning this work is that it doesn't matter whether you're doing handstands or you're just thinking about your day and the other people that share the same space with you. That's a very profound way of kind of thinking differently and looking again at your city. We work with a number of brilliant people around the world to think about how this stages in different places. It's currently in Tokyo. I just got back last week. And one of the things that we have always, since the start, encouraged the artists to feel strong about is to resist that overstuffing the feature set problem that we talked about at the beginning. Inevitably, when you have these kind of extraordinary encounters, the questions come in. Can it be a people counter for the city? Can you do gait analysis? Can I log into Facebook and share what my shadow does with my friends? Is there an app? Can I do some sort of competitive leaderboard to have like the most exciting dancing shadow? And the answer to all of those things, gloriously, has been no. And I think it's a really strong thing that you can choose in designing for these kind of calm technologies, is to choose no, and to sometimes hold on to that kind of contextual driver that you had to start with. This was about creating something that didn't require logins, that didn't require a particular behavior, and that was going to be different for different people according to their own preferences and their own extrovertedness or introvertedness. And so the kind of joy that I have as a continuing producer of this sort of work is that we can give permission to say no as much as we can give permission to say yes. I think that's enough from me on that one. I think what we will basically pick up a couple of points that I've been bubbling. It's sort of chair's privilege. I get to ask questions. However, if you do have questions for us also, do feel free to join us at the microphone as we go along, and we'll open it up to you guys. So I think the first question that I wanted to ask of the group is this question of screens and screen-based media, really. I think a number of the projects that we've shown today by design don't have screens, a number of them do. And so when people think about subtle interfaces, are we talking about screenlessness? Why would you, I guess Chloe, for example, the two projects that you showed, Music Memory Box and Trove, both don't have a screen in the box. What drives the decision for that?
So it's the particular people that I'm designing with, the particular people that are going to be using the product. So for people that have dementia, it's really important that they've got tactile objects to get them out of kind of a dazed and confused state. Physical interaction, holding someone's hand, holding a pebble is really, really important. And the other important bit is the music. So an object and a piece of music, for me, there's no benefit to having a screen for that particular product. And also with Trove for children in care and adopted children, you want something that they can start when they're 4 or 5. And these types of these children might not have access to an iPhone. And you don't want it to be something that you have to ask someone to borrow their phone to log on to. You want it to be open for any child to start recording stories. So for me, it's the particular people.
Pete, do you want to come in on that?
Well, as you see from sort of quite a few projects, they normally combine tangible elements and screen elements. But that's where the current work on resonant bits has been really fun, because it actually doesn't matter what you're doing it on, it's just matching the frequency of something. So I feel like with that, I actually latched onto a technology that's ambivalent. It doesn't really matter. So I guess, I haven't really got a preference for either. It's kind of whatever works.
So what would be a reason not to use a screen?
Well, I was going to answer it with context and appropriateness,
Seems
because I don't think it's as simple as it just being an academic research question about whether we should be using screens or whether we shouldn't be using screens. I think it really is dependent on use cases, the situation. That I think it's practicing, classic user-centered design, understanding how people live their lives, having empathy. All of that. If you take RainCloud, we understood how people live their life in a morning routine, and then I guess this is our solution, but we believe it's a more appropriate, more of an appropriate outcome than push notifications. But the physical world offers many other affordances that digital just can't, and Chloe's touched on those. So you're maybe, as a slight provocation, maybe we're overly in our digital world at the moment. And actually a lot of what is in our digital and way we interact with our digital world could actually be better served in the physical world. It's easier to design for digital.
So thinking a bit about that kind of how you consider context, if we're talking about creating sort of ultimate experiences, what role might there be for the user in helping to develop that experience? How do we predict those experiences if we're not considering the user? Or what approach to sort of co-design or collaboration does this require? Anyone fancy that?
So for me, it's really important, as I said at the beginning, to get the people that will eventually be using the product straight in, right at the start. What are your issues? What are your problems? What do you find difficult? And if you get them involved in the design process, if you start prototyping with them, you're going to get a much more richer product at the end. And it just makes sense to get the end people that are buying the product in at the start, so that you're kind of getting the right type of product, the right functions. So for me, it's getting everyone involved, and I like designing with people. So for the children's product, having 40 12-year-olds is a great, they're all great designers, and getting them aboard on the process is really important.
Yeah. So on...
Is there, I guess, I obviously it's very hard to disagree with that, so that's it's important and brilliant. I guess what I'm wondering is, and this is probably a broader question about designing in general, is there ever a risk of design by committee when you're working with your user group from day one?
So back at Chloe?
Is that back
No.
Okay.
God, that's the. I didn't know you were going to ask that. I mean, that's the question of whether you're better. You're taking extremes, but whether we're better as designers, remaining within our teams against working exclusively with our end users. And my approach would be there's a happy middle ground there. I wonder whether there's loads of stuff around ethnographic research, user research, gathering of insights, observations, all of that sort of thing, that can inform work, and then make sure there's plenty of user testing, and maybe digital and physical is different, because digital you can then be quite lean. You can ship a product pretty early and then iterate as you go along. Physical product's a bit more difficult because you've got to prototype differently because you can't just ship in the same way.
Yeah, I think I might come in here with an observation that's somewhat different.
Good.
So with the development of the Resonant Bits work, it wasn't actually, to be honest, designed as a Calm interface. It's something that actually just happened through testing. So it's because it's on my phone, I was showing people that first music one everywhere. So lunch break, sort of down the pub, anywhere that everyone would have a go. And I found people were playing it, even with the sound off. for far longer than I expected. I'll give it to them, and then 5 minutes later, find out they're still trying to make it work. And observed that the calm kind of happened, and that happened without designing it for a particular user group or anything. So I think it's possible to tap into calm at a sort of fundamental level without addressing a particular need. So I just put that in opposition to you guys, but agreeing at the same time.
I think it complements what I said, actually.
Okay.
Not getting the fight, are we? I guess so with that question that Tom started to raise there about it being easier to prototype in digital because you don't have that full supply chain, if we are making a bit of a case for embracing the physical, can this ever become more than a kind of a niche response to a specific context, or do we feel like this is something that could be scaled, this approach to nuanced design?
Well, I guess my answer to that is I think there are already products on the market by some of the big companies that are pretty calm. I mean, Amazon Echo Dot, those little, for those who don't know, Amazon is, it's a bit like Siri, but it's a product that sits in your corner and you just ask Alexa for something and you could order anything that's through your Amazon account through Alexa or provide you with any information. So it's in your peripheral vision, it's not center of attention, it's there, pretty calm. I mean, I think there are a few products that are beginning to come on market like that. And maybe I think that's your question. I mean,
So that kind of single-use technology that is inherently not trying to do anything but its own.
So that's an example of something that exists. I think it gets a bit more difficult when we look at single-function objects, the physical apps like RainCloud that I showed. There isn't a proven market for something like that. Mm-hmm. That kind of goes down the route a little bit. There's a slight comparison to, say, the Amazon button, where you have a button next to say one of your groceries that you need to order more of, and you press the button and it will be shipped to you. I mean, are you going to have hundreds of those around your home? Are you going to have hundreds of single-function objects like RainCloud around your home? So what we're still needing to do with that product is really test the market, because it's not been proven yet. There aren't products quite like that. But there are certainly, it's still an area to be explored.
Does anyone else want to come in on that one? Yeah, I mean, I think it's a consideration. If we're championing the right thing for the right moment as a sort of a technology solution, then will we end up in a massively cluttered kind of area where we would be better served trying to put everything in a magic rectangle? Thoughts?
Well, yeah, that's phone's transitional technology, isn't it? I mean, we'll be coming from the physical world to the physical world, and we are just in a period where phones exist. So
I did hear a nice idea that this would be we would be of a very odd generation who have like this gesture and as a thing that we do, and this will prove exactly how old we are when we're in the retirement homes, because we'll just be mindlessly trying to kind of scroll through stuff, whereas we will be that sort of bizarre transitional glass tapping generation in between the physical and the physical experience.
Yeah. And on that little side, has anyone seen that kids do that with print as well? I mean, if there's a photograph on a piece of print, they try and zoom it in and out and swipe it. Yeah, brilliant.
As a test of an experiment that someone has suggested to me, could you all please just mime ringing a doorbell for me? Is anyone here under 25? No. Sean at the back, can you mind me doing a doorbell, please? Yeah. It's been suggested to me that the majority of us will ring the doorbell mime like this. If you're under 25, you'll ring it like that, because this.
Interesting.
I don't think that's just been substantiated, but feel free to interrogate anyone under 25 that you know and require them to do gestures. We do kind of evolve our gestural expectations according to the interactions that we have on a daily basis. And I think perhaps what we're saying more than anything else is that we, as the design community, have choices to make in what those interactions will be, and that it doesn't have to always be the same way. It's never been the same way over time, and so we have a stake in the change. Any questions for the panel? Provocations? Come on, Haida.
I think you guys have been talking about this throughout the talk, but I was wondering if you guys could just say what you think makes a technology calming. What is it about a technology that makes it calming? Mm-hmm. And then the second piece of this is, if a piece of what makes a technology calming is that it's easy, is there any danger in that, in making certain behaviors really easy?
Could I pick up on the easy bit? So I'll start with the second question. And one thing I found is a lot of my tech isn't actually that easy to use, but I found that makes it, the frustration about using it actually ends up making it calmer, because people are trying to use it, they get engaged, they zone in, and they forget about everything else going on, to the point of forgetting the conversation and getting sucked in. So I think it isn't as simple as calm. I think engagement can lead to calm. For me, that's the thing I'd go towards. So,
yeah. My first reaction would be the amount that the technology is shouting at you. So I think it's a slightly different response. But calm technology probably is when a piece of technology is not always at the center of attention and isn't always shouting for attention. So it is in your peripheral vision. It's not always there. And on the easy one, I think, I guess whenever someone comes to you to design a new app, having friction is not what a client usually wants. They usually want a frictionless UX, and actually, I don't always subscribe to that. Actually, I'm similar to Pete. I think a bit of friction is quite good. So I don't think easy necessarily leads to calm. Efficiency doesn't lead to calm. There is, and Verity mentioned at the beginning, things like serendipity and spontaneity. These things aren't necessarily associated with efficiency. So I don't think ease is necessarily the right way.
I think there's an analogue there when designing for cities. I think a lot of the narratives around smart cities that are becoming more kind of ingrained in city design are about efficiency and about kind of, for instance, getting from A to B in the most efficient way. So wayfinding is about how swiftly can you move through somewhere without distraction, which is kind of counter to our own inherent knowledge of what we enjoy about cities. You know, what you've been doing in Austin has been slightly kind of discovering strange trucks that you didn't know were going to be there and trying weird kimchi and chips and kind of taking a wrong turn or just staying in a room a little longer and hearing a new talk. These are things that we value kind of instinctively. If we have the luxury of time to get lost, then we quite like getting lost. And so if we're inherently assuming that frictionless efficiency is the desirable human outcome, then we're sort of idiot hypocrites who don't listen to ourselves. So I guess when we're looking at things like Playable City projects, I'm always interested in things that are not harassing, bombarding, frustrating. And so I'm thinking about calm in terms of things that are not requiring us to feel like we're failing or to kind of be getting things wrong or to be overly harassed with, like, now do this, now do this. But I'm not advocating efficiency in that way. That's a good question. Cool. Hi.
That's great. This is really cool. I think my question is, you guys have started with a lot of products where you got a lot of control of the design, or you worked like from the get-go with a small scope. Do you have any recommendations for those of us with products where there's a lot of pressure from up above to make it be all things to all people? And I've heard specifically that phrase in my business. So yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about that.
Would it be okay to ask you what your business is?
I work at Whole Foods.
You work with food?
Whole Foods.
Whole Foods. Oh,
yeah.
Cool. I'm about to do an artist residency looking at food and technology, so I will pick your brains. So yeah, how to kind of push back on that request for more. Well, this talk's going to be on SoundCloud, so you could just kind of play them this.
Can we edit out my question with
Yeah. I do. No, I mean, I guess I've recently, with the guys from Shadowing, they kind of leveled the same thing at me because I was asking for something further, and they went, "What? Didn't you say we could say no?" I think partly, if you can make a case for the inherent value of the right thing for the right moment with the right, and you can kind of show your research, you can explain why you've chosen the sort of the path that you've chosen, and that by kind of clouding the matter or by trying to sort of stuff the feature set, you're likely to diminish and kind of unseat all of that good decision making that you made. I think you can kind of take the client or the manager on a bit of a journey with that one. I think it's a good thing to test. Do you know why you're going for this approach, or is it just the easiest thing? So I think you have to be able to justify your position. But I think it's almost like a sign of a poor product if you're trying to do 18 different things, because it means you haven't made enough editing decisions along the way.
And I would say everyone says that they love their iPhone, but they don't actually love the physical iPhone. They love their data, they love the apps, they love what it does. And I'm really interested in people would love an object that you inherit from your grandma because it's embedded with so much emotion. So I would say that products that you build over time that don't do everything all at once, that they get better over time, you kind of build up an emotional attachment with that object, and therefore you're more likely to love it, look after it, keep it for a longer time.
Yeah.
So those kind of ideas.
Yeah. But in a commercial environment, this is it's a really tricky question to answer.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why my reaction was like, how will I answer that? But the way I approach that is pairing it back and finding what your unique selling point is for the product, and then just trying to, manage the people that are managing the project a little bit. It's a cliche, but I mean, it's tricky. It comes down to the details of it, really, and just trying to work them through and prioritizing. That's how I do it. It doesn't, and that applies to all projects, not just these kind of tech projects.
Cool.
Hi there.
Hey, nice work, guys. I'm an interaction designer myself. I was wondering, this might be like tricky to answer, but
Great.
I don't know. Just like very curious about like, like subtle tech isn't the same maybe as like invisible, but it's definitely getting there. And I was just wondering, if you had like any concrete examples of like dangers or, things to look out for, or like misunderstandings that happens with the user when it's like, super seamless.
Yeah, I mean, there's endless examples of where almost like subtle has been taken so far as to be like unnoticed.
Well, I guess might have the closest example with one of the Resonant Bits one, where people really don't know if they're in control a lot of the time, which is interesting because you have this weird feeling of slipping into control and then back out. And people really seem to really like that, which is weird because in most cases I imagine they wouldn't. But there's this whole thing of kind of grasping for control and then kind of getting it. So I don't know what, how can I conclude with that, but it's
Trust.
It's weird. It's weird. Yeah.
Yeah, trust comes to mind immediately. Yeah. I mean, if it becomes too inconspicuous, invisible, then I would imagine that it's harder to build trust with your user group. But then we are talking the Internet of Things here as well. So although data security is often talked about with IoT, you would have to build a lot of that data gathering into your products. So something like, I'll use RainCloud again. If I wanted to gather the data of the environment around it, I would have to put those sensors into the board in that product. Not all IoT, this is a slight tangential point, not all IoT necessarily is capturing your data, but around that you would have to be so transparent if your product is becoming more and more in the background. So that would be my thought on that.
I think one kind of recent commercial example that I don't think they mind people talking about is the sort of Nest smoke detector that had a kind of a wave to snooze effectively interface that felt like a very kind of beautiful, subtle, appropriate way of going, actually, I've just burnt the sausages off. But they had to change that pretty rapidly because what they were discovering was it was very, very easy to have done that without really intending to, or without that being the gesture that you make. And so there was a real danger that in the event of an actual fire, perhaps you're panicked, or you've managed to sort of be waving your arm in the vicinity of this device before it's even gone off, and that becomes a massive health risk. So they had to kind of slightly ramp up the unsubtlety of that so that it was really apparent that that was the gesture that you were making. And I think that's one of those things about kind of really cooking in user testing, is that sometimes it can feel like a really appropriate interface and a really subtle interface that will avoid the kind of harassing bombardment that we're trying to avoid. But there is such a thing as too subtle when something is that kind of life and death critical.
I think I come with a very quick, broad generalisation. I think subtlety is achieved through skill. So if you have something like Nest, I don't think you'd ever say you're a skillful user of Nest. It's a bit weird. But if you build an interface that allows you to become skillful, then it's like you end up in the world of, say, I don't know, like in the kitchen with cooking, you can be a very skillful cook. And that's where the subtlety comes from, is that advanced stage. That's what I'd say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Naveen. I'm a UX strategist. So I had a question, kind of a two-part question. One was, do you think CommTech encourages presence?
Do you think contact encourages presence?
Comm technology encourages presence, and if you think it does, like in which world? Is it like in the physical world or the digital world? Like where is it encouraging the presence?
I have a slight semantic issue with really separating digital and physical, because we've got into this slightly odd place where we imagine that digital is ethereal and magic and separate to us, whereas we are the creators and puppet masters of it in many cases, or not the puppet masters in others. So yeah, I have a small heckle that goes up with digital versus physical, but I realise I started this, so it's my own fault. But in terms of, do we think that calm technology encourages presence or kind of a heightened sense of awareness?
Potentially. Well, if you take what we've been talking about, I guess it probably does a little bit, in that we talked a lot about being in mindfully in your own presence and you can easily be distracted by technologies. And once you're playing with your phone, maybe you're not fully aware of your own presence when you're doing lots of other things with technology, potentially. Mm-hmm. I'm sure I'm going with this. I think you can pick up on that one, actually. But I want to just agree with Verity on the physical-digital thing.
Groovy.
I mean, they're the same. Nowadays, we're going to have to consider them as the same thing, or in the same conversation. Physical doesn't live over there, and digital live over there.
There's no such thing as the cloud.
No, it's all part of... We're on the spectrum.
Sure.
In terms of encouraging presence on that, is it a linear? I don't think it's a linear spectrum either.
If we can start imbuing, so I think what we know from digital is it gives us all these extraordinary affordances. We can connect to the collective intelligence. We can be responsive to live happenings. We can bring in data to trigger that. I think the skill here is in applying some of those affordances to the physical world. So this is where, for me, the excitement of the Internet of Things comes in. It's not about sensor networks and cities that sort of predict how much traffic there is. It's about the fact that we can imbue the physical world with some of those digital affordances and have to consider some of those problems that come with that about privacy and about who controls that. I personally would say that you're exactly in the middle of what I think calm technology does. I think that it makes space for a more present, more considered experience. So I think yes. I'm also aware we're a tiny bit down on time, so possibly last question, and then we do have a couple of sort of takeaway gifts to share with you. So we will
Physical.
Oh no, that's sad. No, we should have brought gifts.
Additional gifts.
We'll buy you all a beer. Let's have a final question. Hi.
I'm getting calmer already.
Use
beer, yeah. But I wanted to think about the Whole Foods, because the message of Whole Foods is not to be everything to all people. And so I think the idea of matching the sense of purity with the message that they're trying to create the software for, whatever it is, that you could talk to the manager about the mission of Whole Foods and matching it with the design of the thing. That's just one thing that popped into my mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think the benefits of technology on that point, the benefits are stuck behind a screen. And if you think about at home, maybe you've got a glass shelf where all your precious things are. And I think the benefits are really with the physical and tactile world. I think when we combine them in really nice experiences, then we get the benefits of both. And often, if it is just a piece, a recording of a child's voice that they're talking about their holiday, that's so simple, but it does so much for the child. And their focus is really just, all their focus is kind of on the story and the way of storytelling. And I think that's really important to have like simple storytelling. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. I think we will be hanging around afterwards, so if you have more questions, please do come and harangue us and demand that I buy you a beer, which I now realise I've promised in public. But so that we can kind of share with you some of our, I guess, top takeaways from the thinking that we've been doing on this one. We each just have a little point to share. So for me, I would say in the consideration of the design that you're commencing, consider using what's already there. Particularly in sort of city design and in public space design, so much of the city infrastructure is there at your disposal. There isn't always the need to reinvent the wheel or to kind of put new things into the world. Always start by considering how you might augment what already exists. Pete?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier. Just for me, it's the calmness came from having such an engaging interaction. You're just drawn into it, and it doesn't matter that there are sort of notifications pinging off in the background. You're just sucked in. So that for me, that's my entry into calm technology.
Thank you. Chloe?
Mine is to not assume what you think is needed and to involve the owners of the product in the design process and kind of form a collaboration with the people you're designing with.
Perfect. And Tom?
Mine's from a designer's perspective, and I realise I haven't talked about closure experiences now, and I thought I was going to, but design end to end. So right at the beginning, gathering insights, observations, understanding your users. Quite obvious, really, but I think that's where everyone needs to start. But maybe equally or more importantly, let's think about closure experiences. So the great guy in the UK called Joe McLeod, who talks about closure experiences, which is the end of life for your digital and physical products. Not just in an environmental sustainability point of view, but actually from a user's perspective. How do you finish your relationship, end your relationship with a product? And what does that look like?
Wonderful. Well, we are absolutely slap bang on time, which I'm very proud of. But thank you so much for the conversation. It's been a real pleasure exploring this with you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the festival.